Hello again. I was on the British government's own website the other day, leafing idly through a section headed Crime in England and Wales, year ending December 2021. And pretty heartening it was too. It seems that fewer crimes are committed in this country every year, and that the crime rates for most of the common offences are tumbling. This is very exciting and not something which I would have noticed without the assistance of government statisticians. In the description to this video I give a link to the relevant part of the website so that viewers are able to share my excitement at the way in which crime in Britain has now been all but eradicated. Just turn to figure 9 for example and you will see a graph which shows how theft is well on the way to disappearing. In 1995 there were 11.5 million cases of theft, but by last year this had fallen to fewer than 3 million. An astonishing triumph for policing, I think. It's the same trend with homicide. In 2003 over 1,000 homicides were recorded, but last year this had plunged down to fewer than 700. That's a fall of a third in the last 20 years. Looking now at figure 7, which shows crimes of violence, the picture is even more encouraging. We find that in 1995 there were almost 4.5 million crimes of violence. Last year this figure had fallen dramatically to fewer than 1.3 million cases, so we are now seeing only a third as many violent crimes as we did in the 1990s. It's all good news, isn't it? These figures put me strongly in mind of those for the production of various goods which used to be published in the Soviet Union regularly. There would be announcements that the target for making tractors had been exceeded by a huge margin, or that wheat harvests had never been higher. Of course, the ordinary citizens knew that these figures were false and simply ignored them. In the same way, we all know perfectly well that theft and violence have not really fallen so sharply in Britain, and we suspect there must be another explanation for the amazingly optimistic statistics which we are being given. The answer is not hard to find, really. These are reported crimes and convictions. There is increasing evidence that people are now unable or unwilling to report crimes, and so this has the effect of reducing the official perception of crime. In other words, a lot of the thefts and assaults are just being overlooked because victims do not think it worth contacting the police to report them. Why might this be? Roughly half the police stations in Britain have closed in the last 10 years, which by a curious and uncanny coincidence is also the period when crime is supposed to have dropped most sharply. I'll give a link to a report about this too in the description to this video. At one time, police stations were in a sense community hubs. People would hand in lost property or go to report something or other. I remember this happening during my childhood. There would be posters warning about Colorado beetles, and the police officers would be cheerful and have time to chat to people. Sometimes old people would go in there and report something, and the police always took the time to talk to them. I live in Essex, and the nearest Essex police station to me is 11 miles away in Harlow. There is a nearer one, but of course it has no public counter anymore. What happens if something is stolen from me now? Suppose my lawnmower is pinched from the garden shed. It's not an emergency, so I wouldn't ring 999. I can't pop into the police station to report it, so I suppose I could ring 101, the non-emergency police number. There are huge delays in answering this number though, and some people have reported having to hang on for over an hour. During that time, a recorded message urges you to use an online reporting platform, but often the categories offered on this do not match the circumstances of the offence which the person wants to report. The result is that people sometimes just give up and the crime remains unreported. Result: see those crime levels fall again. In the case of a stolen lawnmower, I wouldn't expect the police actually to investigate the theft. I'm sure they're far too busy for that. The most I might want is a crime number for the insurance. In the end, I might just think it easier to buy a cheap new lawnmower for £80 or £90 rather than go through all the hassle with the police. Many people feel this way, and there's also an increasing feeling with a lot of us these days that the police are simply not looking very friendly and that we don't really want to have dealings with some thuggish looking guy who is unshaven, tattooed and wearing dark glasses. We just don't really want to trouble them, and so they don't get to hear about the things which we as ordinary citizens are experiencing. I don't for a moment suppose that anybody watching this really thinks that violence and theft in Britain is now running at about a third of what it was in 1995. But there it is. That's the official line. The more that the police retreat and become inaccessible and uninviting to us, then the fewer offences will be reported to them, and the more successful they will be in claiming to be driving down crime.